So what was the impetus for A Faith Under Siege?
That's a great question. So, and first of all, thanks for having me today. I live in a small town in Colorado. I was there this summer, and I got a call from a friend that said, "Do you want to go to Ukraine?" And
How did you respond to that when you?
like my first answer was no, and I had 1,000 reasons. Right? I have no association with Ukraine. I don't know that I've actually met a Ukrainian person before this summer. I've got 4 kids. There's a war there,
Life is busy. Yeah.
List the reasons, right? But God sometimes doesn't follow our logic. And I really felt called to go over there to do a humanitarian aid mission and then also to document what was happening to Christians in the Russian occupied territories. So we traveled the entire length of the front lines from Kharkiv all the way down to Kherson, interviewed over 30 people that had directly suffered in this conflict. Christians, various denominations, but primarily evangelical Christians. They seem to be the ones that are targeted the most in this conflict by the Russians.
So, okay, there's so much to unpack here
Sure,
because from sort of an outside perspective, the assumption is, well, Russia, they claim to be a Christian,
Exactly.
country, right?
Yes.
They claim to be now. This is the claim.
Yes.
Why in the world would there be any kind of persecution of Christians from a country that's claiming they're Christian?
So if you look at the stats, 72% of Russians would say that they're Christians. Similar statistics in Ukraine, mostly Orthodox in both countries. So from that perspective, it would seem strange that as they fought, you would see any kind of religious dimension to that. But the underpinnings of the war are really important to understand. So the Russian Orthodox Church has actually declared this a holy war against Ukraine and the West, including America. And so they've made claims like if a Russian soldier dies on the battlefield in Ukraine, all his sins will be forgiven. A lot of stuff that from a Christian tradition is pretty weird for us to hear that. As they come into parts of Ukraine and take them over, evangelicals are really somebody they go after first. And there's a few reasons for this. The first is Baptists, Pentecostals, those are seen as American faiths. And so when you see a Baptist, that's got to be an American spy, right? So there's a geopolitical aspect to it as well. The second one is evangelicals and Protestants don't have the same church structure that can be controlled. So you find a Baptist and a Protestant, his only allegiance is to Jesus. That's really hard to control. And not being able to control faith groups is not something the invading Russian forces are very excited about.
Well, we see that in North Korea and China too. When you can't control people,
Exactly.
And they're independent house churches, you want to get rid of them.
Faith is a super disruptive concept for control. And the more that faith can be erased, the more that territory can be controlled. And so that's kind of what we saw over and over again. And the statistics really play this out too. So you've seen around 47 faith leaders that have been killed in the conflict.
Intentionally killed in the conflict.
Yes. And if you look at the statistics there, 2 to 4% of Ukrainian population would be Protestants. Of those faith leaders killed, 22 were Protestant. So that's like about half. That doesn't map out. When you look at churches, 630 churches have been either shelled, looted, or destroyed by the Russian army. 343 were Protestant churches. So more than half. It just doesn't map up statistically. And so that was the big thing of wanting to show the documentary is not just to go through these stats, but to hear the firsthand stories of folks that had suffered under this. And it kind of mapped out towards a very intentional effort to erase this faith from those occupied territories.
So when you went initially and you started, what was going through your mind? Obviously you were reluctant to go at first. You go and you're starting to have these interactions. What stood out to you the most as you were doing that?
That's a great question. First, once I kind of stepped out and followed the Spirit, things got very calm for me. So we were in places that there were shellings, glide bombs were hitting the cities we were in. Some of the restaurants we ate in were blown up like 4 days after we left. I don't remember being afraid during this, and that's not because I'm brave or anything like that. The Ukrainians we were with were not afraid. And the feeling of being, following God's will in terms of telling this story was just immensely comforting to me. In terms of my own faith journey over there, if you look back, the entire New Testament was written about a small group of unwanted religious folks
Right.
that were, kind of persona non grata by a much larger empire. That same feeling came through. These folks on the front lines, they're like New Testament, first century Christians, and just their faith and the simplicity of relying on God, having to rely on God for their very existence. It just absolutely filled me up. I've probably not been at a more of an apex in my faith than when I came back from Ukraine after spending time with these folks.
I mean, you look at some of these numbers: 630 churches shelled, looted, or destroyed. You mentioned the 49 priests, pastors, and other faith leaders murdered by Russia. 19,546 Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. What in the world is going on there?
So what you see when the Russian forces would come in, there's obviously in any place you're going to see orphanages and those kind of things. In war, parents are killed, and it leaves a lot of orphans. Russia, instead of sending them back to extended family in Ukraine, have taken them and forcibly adopted them into Russia. Also in the occupied territories. There are also a series of military camps these kids are sent to. So as they get towards 17, 18, they actually be militarized, and some of them are on the front lines fighting against their state now. So it's a very concerted effort to take these kids away.
So they want to stamp out, obviously, faith. They want to and they want to control the narrative.
Right.
When it comes to A Faith Under Siege, when people watch this film, when they dive into it, what do you want the audience to feel and think at the end?
I think the biggest thing is, especially for American Christians, to have real information, right? There's so much political stuff and propaganda on all different sides. We wanted to make it very clear these are firsthand stories from Christians that have lived this. Armed with that, I think Christians can make the right decisions in terms of praying and supporting and helping in whatever way they feel called to. But that all starts with good information, and that information comes from those firsthand stories of people that have lived through this. So that's what we're really hoping is first that people will understand what's going on. And then on our website, we've got a lot of resources in terms of what people can do, in terms of donating to help bring abducted children back, rebuilding of churches, rebuilding of homes, whatever people feel called to do, and just pray for the situation. Pray for Ukraine, pray for the Russians to have a change of heart. I think there's a huge power of prayer in this conflict, and not just for Ukrainian Christians, but for Russia as well.
You interviewed dozens of people who are in the middle of this, right?
Right.
Is there one story, one play, one that really got you, that really sticks with you?
Yeah, I think every one of them ended with a bit of hope, right? And I don't think there's a Christian story that can be told without hope at the end. We met a pastor in Kherson. He's got 8 kids. He was running a church with about 50 parishioners every week. And when the Russians invaded, he wanted to flee with his family, but God told him, I think his quote was, "I have not released you yet," right? So he stayed, provided aid. When the Russians came, a lot of the other churches were shut down. His church swelled to about 150, which is great. After the Russians were pushed out by the Ukrainian army, his weekly attendance is something like 600 or 700 people. So the entire building's packed, the courtyard is packed, the exterior courtyard is packed. They actually have to put speakers out in the parking lot to service all the people that want to come to the thing, and that's great. Now this guy is on his 4th minivan because the first 3 have been destroyed by Russian drones. So he's been attacked 5 times, including his kids. Thankfully, none of them have been killed. Some wounded, but hearing those stories. Just what happened to him and the way he responded. It was such a Christian response of saying, this is tough, I'm going to stay here and help my community. The thing that really stuck with me too is if you look in one of those services of 600 people or 700 people, about 20% are secular folks. They're not Christians. They're just coming for his message of hope and defiance and resilience there. And that's what a great testament to our faith, right? That you've got people that don't even share the same faith coming to hear that. That really uplifted me, and we still keep in touch with them even today.
Wow. Okay, well, the film is A Faith under siege. Really appreciate you breaking it all down today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.